June 4th, 1900, a massive crowd of millions had gathered at Tiananmen Square in China. Most of these protesters were students who had been camping here for the past 1.5 months, raising slogans and demanding things like the establishment of democracy in the country, an end to corruption, and freedoms such as freedom of speech. We want change, we want freedom of speech. But the Communist Party in power turned a deaf ear until June. But when the Communist Party started to feel that this crowd of students gathered in the millions could spark a major revolution and shake the very roots of communism, it made one of the bloodiest decisions in history. In the dead of night, hundreds of tanks and hundreds of thousands of soldiers were deployed on the streets of Beijing, and the army was given the order: clear the square at any cost. What happened next at Tiananmen Square shook the entire world. China's army openly fired a barrage of bullets at unarmed people. The height of brutality was reached when, on government orders, the Chinese army began mercilessly crushing its own citizens with tanks. The screams of the protesters, the sound of gunfire, and the smoke from moving vehicles turned all of Beijing into a deathly silence. Within just a few hours, the death toll reached 10,000, and the dream of democracy at Tiananmen Square was drowned in blood. But the question was, how could the same Tiananmen Square, which had witnessed the birth of the People's Republic of China in 1949, where Mao Zedong had raised his party's red flag high, why, after 40 years, did the same party on the same ground order tanks to be used against its own students? What was that fear that made the government afraid of its own country's children? They built a gate, the question of the...
For the second day in a row, the day or event in China was out of control. 1 million demonstrators assaults the streets of Beijing, and there have been demonstrations for democracy. A strike from the West consisting of 500 trucks full of troops, an estimated 8,000 soldiers moved into the city.
The troops fired indiscriminately at people on the street who would not yield.
A young Chinese man stops an army tank with nothing more than his courage and...
The exact number of deaths from the crackdown remains uncertain, with estimates ranging from several hundred to several thousand. The occupation of
Tiananmen Square is over. The student protest that gripped the world ended in a bloody night as the army moved in.
Since October 1st, 1949, only one party has ruled China, the Chinese Communist Party, the CCP. Since then, the party has had complete control over everything, from the government to the military and law enforcement. In 1976, when the party's greatest leader, Mao Zedong, passed away, China entered a new era. After him, Deng Xiaoping took charge of the country. He not only maintained the Communist Party's political grip, but also launched major economic reforms to transform China. To heal the country from the devastation of the revolution and put it on the path of organization, Deng implemented the policy of reform and opening up. Under this policy, the government encouraged foreign investment. Permission was given to start private businesses, and several special economic zones were established. With these steps taken by the government, new life began to flow into China's economy. Millions of people rose out of poverty, and China started connecting with the global market. But along with this transformation, some problems also arose. As privatization increased, so did corruption. Deng Xiaoping's close leaders began to line their own pockets. Inflation in the country started rising rapidly. The gap between the rich and the poor began to widen. People from villages started rushing to cities in search of employment. But even there, job opportunities were very limited. University graduates, especially students of social sciences and humanities, started remaining unemployed. Private companies were no longer obligated to hire students from any particular state. As a result, many high-paying jobs fell victim to nepotism and favoritism. As a result, getting a good state-assigned placement in China became a dream as difficult as going to war. This unemployment and inequality filled the youth with anger, and universities became the new battlegrounds for political debate. Students openly began to raise demands for democracy, transparency, and human rights. In this environment, in 1986, Fang Liji, who had been a physics professor at Princeton University in England, returned to China and visited several universities across the country. During this time, he gave lectures on liberty, human rights, and the separation of powers. Fang believed that the real solution to China's problems lay only in political reform. Soon, the number of Fang's followers began to grow, and his recorded speeches started circulating rapidly throughout the country. Amidst the turmoil, the increasingly popular Fang began to irk the Communist Party. So they accused him of promoting Western lifestyles, capitalism, and a multi-party system in the country. They claimed that his ideas were weakening the police ideology and traditional values here. But this did not diminish Fang's popularity among the youth, and in December 1986, thousands of students took to the streets against the government to demand their rights. Soon these protests spread to Shanghai, Beijing, and many other cities as well. In this growing atmosphere, the country's leadership also split into two factions. On one side were conservatives like Li Peng and Chen Yun, who favored strict control, while on the other side were reformists like Hu Yaobang and Zhao Ziyang, who saw merit in the students' demands. While Zhao Ziyang was the premier, that is, the head of government, Hu Yaobang was serving as the general secretary of the Chinese Communist Party, CCP. However, as general secretary, Hu Yaobang's progressive thinking did not sit well with the party's hardliners. They accused Hu Yaobang of mishandling the protests and of weakening the party's authority by adopting a soft stance toward the students. The opposition against him within the party grew so intense that, in the end, he had to resign from the position of general secretary in 1987. His resignation made him a symbol of hope for the people. In China, the spark of student protests continued to smolder for nearly 2 years. Meanwhile, on April 15, 1989, Hu Yaobang suddenly died under mysterious circumstances, which came as a huge shock to the students. The students believed that conservative pressure was behind his death. In this way, Hu Yaobang's death ignited the already simmering youth who were boiling with economic dissatisfaction, political frustration, and a desire for change. After this, thousands of students gathered at Tiananmen Square to pay tribute to Bang and